Fuji Pro 400H. What a film. Sad that Fuji had to discontinue it because they could no longer source the raw materials, but glad I was able to buy a bunch of well-kept frozen boxes because that's how we've gotten here today. When I make a preset, I start by getting very familiar with the Filmstock. This meant shooting it exclusively for a bit, like I did all of last winter. I have to ask, do I even like this Filmstock? Because if I don't like it, I definitely don't want to spend the next year developing a digital version of it. As someone who is very familiar with Kodak but less familiar with Fuji, I was intimidated by those purple, yellow, and magenta tones. I was intimidated by the greens and the lack of saturation. But I did like it. I think the pastel tones of this are very beautiful and timeless. Nothing I photographed ever looked bad. And that makes sense because this Filmstock is to Fuji what Portra is to Kodak. It's a beautiful, professional Filmstock, and these are some of my favorite images from the past year. Now, the process of turning it into a preset is both tricky and fun. I start by testing how it exposes at different ratings. Then I create a colorful scene in shade and direct sunlight, and I shoot that on both film and digital. Once those scans come back, I do normal corrections to the scan to make sure that the black point is correct, and then I begin the process of matching to the film as close as possible. And as possible is an important identifier here. Digital will never be film. It has different strengths and weaknesses. Film responds different than a sensor does. I'm not going to go into all of it. The important thing I focus on first, though, here is color, then contrast, and then how exposure behaves in relation to color and contrast. And when it's close, I go out and shoot some similar real-life photos on both film and digital, and I see how the preset does. Then I rework it, and rework it some more, and I do that again, and again, and again. And at some point, it gets there. And all the things that I learned in that entire process, well, they lead me to the modifiers, which makes a preset pack special. And this one, Fuji 400H, it's special. I have always wanted to do an intro like this so you guys know what it takes to bring these presets to life and get them up on the shop. Like, we don't just throw these things together. They are like many months in development with a lot of work. And so I'm really glad that I finally get to show that to you. But without wasting your time, let's go ahead and jump in. Let's take a look at very good presets, Fuji 400H. So I'm going to walk you through what is included in the pack, and we're going to spend a little more time than usual talking about these modifiers because every one of the modifiers that is in this pack represents something we experienced shooting the film. Like, this film was very diverse in different scenarios. It was probably the most diverse film I have ever shot while still maintaining excellent color and contrast. But we'll talk about that as we get through the modifiers. If you take a look at the pack, you've got Fuji 400H, which is the main preset. Next up, we've got daylight white balance because Fuji 400H is a daylight white balanced film stock, and therefore it's our recommendation that you shoot with your camera already set to daylight white balance or just around like 5200K. But even if you don't, this modifier will correct that and fix your white balance to daylight. Expired color is based on much older examples that we were able to find online of this film being shot because the version that we have all expired in like 2021 to 2023. So we didn't have any super expired film, but as we looked into how other people were acquiring this film, like really old copies of it, and the color spectrums that they were getting, we thought that would be a fun modifier. And so basically expired color turns us into a totally different preset. So it's like you're getting a second preset in the pack, even though it's a modifier. Faded is one that I'm basically using every time because I like a more faded black point. Like, our blacks are still deep with the faded modifier, but it's going to lift that black point and just give you more of an analog look. I really love it. Grain Plus is just going to increase the grain. I mean, we were shooting 120 Fuji 400H and 35 is a bit more grainier, and so we have a Grain Plus to simulate the grain that we've seen on 35 scans. HC is high contrast. And now let's talk about these next two highlight modifiers. The first one says highlights restored. So let me tell you just a little bit about the highlights on Fuji 400H. They are pretty crushed. Like, the highlights as we experienced them were just crushed down pretty far, which gave the film a very smooth look from top to bottom. To get that same effect in digital, it requires us to bury the highlights. But in digital, you get a problem when you do that in certain lighting scenarios, like shooting into the sun. So if you shoot into the sun with your highlights all the way down, you get this really digital looking sun. It looks like total hot garbage. The preset, while having crushed highlights, does not work well if you shoot into the sun. That's a limitation of digital versus film. So by using the highlights restored modifier, it's going to put that shot right back to how it's supposed to look. Then we have a highlights warm modifier. What I found interesting about this Filmstock is in certain lighting scenarios, the highlights were warm, and in other scenarios, I would say most scenarios, the highlights were cool. When you're shooting something like portrait or gold, you can kind of anticipate what your highlights are going to be, but this was just kind of like what the lighting was. It made it cool or warm. And when I thought I would get cooler highlights, like in Blue Hour, I actually got warm highlights. And in the middle of the day, highlights were super cool. So by default, the preset is going to have more midday vibes, but you can click highlights warm and simulate how the film behaved in certain scenarios that warm the highlights up. So if you use this preset and the highlights look too blue, just click this and it'll fix it. Now, remember a second ago when I was talking about the crushed highlights? To get this film to increase exposure the proper way, which looked consistent as you would overexpose the film, we had to make the base preset just a touch darker. One thing we never like to do is to hard code the exposure or the white balance on our presets. And for that reason, you lose about a third to half a stop of exposure by applying this preset. But if you want to get that pushed film look, all you've got to do is use the push modifier, and it's going to bring it back to where you had it, or most likely where you had it, and then take it a little step further. But I find myself pushing it even further than that in almost all the scenarios of how I like to use this preset. And finally, we've got this soft blues modifier. Now, you're not going to see this modifier in every single photo, even if you click it. But if you've got a shot like middle of the day of a lake, like a body of water, maybe there's a lot of blue in the frame, the blues can get a little intense. And by clicking soft blues, it's just going to chill the blue tones out a little bit and make it look more like the Filmstock in those types of scenarios. So that is the pack and its modifiers. Now let's just take a look at a handful of photos. We're not going to go through all these. I just selected a lot of the ones I've shot recently, as well as just some that I like and want to try the preset on. All right, let's start off with this shot from the Tetons. This is like a mid-morning shot, beautiful lighting, nice little frame here. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite photos I've taken this year. And I've shot these barns like a dozen times, but this was a new composition that I did. I love going back to the same place over and over and finding new stuff. We'll go ahead and put the preset on, and you'll see, if you look at the histogram in the top right, you're going to see the exposure drop just a little bit, but that's okay. We've got the preset on. My camera was already at a daylight white balance. We're not going to mess with that. And then my trifecta with this preset has been faded, grain, high contrast. And that's the look right there that I like. There's the before, and there's the after. We could make a case to warm it up a little bit. I'm going to do that now by bringing it up just a touch, before and after. And with the theme of harsh lighting, let's take a look at this beach scene here. Here's the preset. We'll just go ahead and push this one, daylight white balance, to warm it up a little bit, and that just might be it. That legitimately looks like a film shot. Here's the before and the after. A couple months ago in LA, I saw an elopement happening at the observatory. So I'm going to come in here now and we're going to pretend like we shot this elopement. Here's the preset. Let's push it. High contrast, grain it up, faded, daylight white balance. I'm going to push it even more. Here is our before and our after. I also corrected the geometry. Here is a lake near Mammoth on the Eastern Sierras. Let's go ahead and put the preset on. And now let's do the expired color and look at the difference. Here's the preset. And again, this is a scenario where we'd want to use those soft blues, but just ignore the intensity of the blues for just a minute. Let's go to that expired color again. And now it's a totally different feeling in this photo. High contrast and more grain. And maybe we want to put some warm highlights in here, which you can still do even on the expired colors. So here we go, warm highlights. Here is our before and our after. This shot here is from a commercial shoot I did many years ago, but let's take a look at it. Here's the preset. We'll bring the exposure up, and just one click of the preset, it looks great, but it needs some warmth in it, and I'm just gonna go in and warm it up. I'm gonna add more grain, some high contrast. I'm gonna brighten it up even a little more, and that feels great. Our last one here, this was not a commercial shoot, but how epic would it be if I could have shot for Delta? Here's the preset, and look how blue it is. This is a scenario where you'd come in, use soft blues. See, as I hover it on and off, what it does, soft blues, high contrast, and grain. It's my jam. And now let's totally flip it. Let's put on expired color. And even that looks great. Happy with it. Bring up the brightness a little bit. And here's the before and the after. So by now, I think I've given you enough examples of how this preset works so you can understand the new, very good presets, Fuji 400H. This pack retails for $30, but you can get it for a discount by using the code that is linked right below. The link, the code, everything is in the description, so be sure to go hit that, check it out, see plenty more examples. And if you are a Capture One user, you can click right here and it's gonna take you to Chris's video. He's the guy that makes our Capture One presets because he does this entire process from scratch, so we don't just like copy and paste a preset over. That doesn't work. We build this completely from the ground up in Capture One as well. And Chris has a video demoing the Capture One version, and he's also kicking off his channel. So again, right here, go check it out. And I'm linking that below too. We hope you guys enjoy this pack and you love it and find it super useful for your photography. Would love to hear what you think and also about that intro, because I'm proud of that intro to finally show you guys what we actually do. There's a lot of really crazy and amazing stuff on the horizon. So if you're not like signed up to get information, be sure to join the Very Good Presets mailing list. Even if you don't pick up this pack, get on that mailing list because we've got some very huge announcements coming soon. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.